This is On the Line, and I'm Eric Felton. U.S. intelligence agencies have publicly presented their finding that Syria was building a secret nuclear reactor with the help from North Korea. The reactor complex, which could have produced the material for nuclear weapons, was attacked in September by the Israeli Air Force. After the site was bombed, Syria itself destroyed what was left. White House Press Secretary Dana Perino said that this cover-up only served to reinforce our confidence that this reactor was not intended for peaceful purposes. When Israel bombed the Syrian nuclear site, the U.S. remained studiously silent about the attack. U.S. President George Bush said that caution dictated keeping quiet. "We were concerned," he said, "that an early disclosure would increase the risk of a confrontation in the Middle East." Why then did the United States finally, nearly 8 months later, provide an extensive briefing on the Syrian facility? President Bush said that he wanted to send a message both to North Korea and Iran.
We also wanted to advance certain policy objectives through the disclosures, and one would be to the North Koreans to make it abundantly clear that we may know more about you than you think, and therefore it's essential that you have a complete disclosure on not only your plutonium activities but proliferation as well as enrichment activities. And then we have an interest in sending a message to Iran and the world, for that matter, about just how destabilizing a nuclear proliferation would be in the Middle East.
The U.S. is particularly concerned about Iran's effort to acquire a nuclear capability because of that nation's longstanding support of terrorism. The State Department recently released its annual report on international terrorism and found that Iran is still the world's most active state sponsor of terrorism. Iran's nuclear program means that the clerical regime may, quote, have the capability to manufacture weapons of mass destruction that could get into the hands of terrorists, unquote. Like its ally Iran, Syria has long sponsored terrorist violence. Can nuclear proliferation be stopped? I'll ask my guests. Gordon Chang, author of the book Nuclear Showdown: North Korea Takes on the World. Fareed Qadri, President of the Reform Party of Syria. And Ilan Berman, Vice President for Policy at the American Foreign Policy Council and author of the book Tehran Rising: Iran's Challenge to the United States. Welcome. Thanks for joining us. Fareed Qadri, let me ask you first, why now was Syria trying to build a nuclear reactor?
Well, I think Syria has learned that it could get away with murder. We've seen Syria act irresponsibly towards Iraq, towards Israel, towards Lebanon, and we've seen it over and over again that they only get a slap on the wrist in the form of sanctions, and they felt secure enough in the sense of that their regime is untouchable, and they went for the gold. And I think that is the reason why Syria feels confident enough that if it acquires nuclear weaponry, that the international community cannot muster enough strength, enough courage to actually bring the regime down.
Gordon Chang, is this something that North Korea has demonstrated? Once you get your hands on nuclear weapons, there's not a lot people can do to pressure you.
Well, that's exactly what the history of the last 3 or 4 years has been. North Korea has been trying to get a bomb since perhaps the 1960s, clearly since the 1970s or 1980s. The United States and the rest of the international community has acted against that, but has really been ineffectual. And of course, North Korea detonated an atomic device in 2006. Since then, the international community has rushed out to try to provide rewards. And really, countries like Syria, Iran, and others clearly can see what's going to happen. So it makes a lot of sense for them to try to get the bomb and then try to reap the benefits of being considered nuclear power.
Ilan Berman, has the international community basically set up a system now that encourages proliferation?
Well, I think in a way it has, and it's a very troubling development. You really have two things that are going on. One is the traditional arms control nuclear nonproliferation regime that's centered around the 1968 non-proliferation treaty. And that regime has groups countries into categories of haves, countries that have nuclear weapons, and have-nots. And what it does is it creates the incentives for countries to pursue peaceful civilian nuclear energy programs. It incentivizes and actually mandates that the countries that are the haves help them do that. But in doing so, it helps countries like Iran that have questionable intent use that as a stepping stone for potentially later building civilian, from civilian program, building a nuclear weapons program. The other track you have is that over the last couple of years, we've seen a deviation from this strict arms control theory and strict arms control practice to a more values-based proliferations approach, where you have countries like India, which is not part of the NPT, still being grandfathered in and giving some of the benefits because we like the regime there. And that sends a very dangerous message. It essentially sends a message that we value character, regime character over norms. And it works in the case of India because we like the regime there. But it doesn't necessarily work in the case of Iran, and it gives Iran a greater excuse to cry foul in the international sphere.
Well, Fareed Godri, why hasn't Syria been crying foul here about the loss of its reactor?
Well, Syria has taken the position that it's not building a reactor. It has taken the position that the international community, there's a conspiracy in the international community to come after Syria. And in fact, their ambassador has equated the same kind of pressure that they're being exerted against them as equal to the pressure that we exerted against Iraq prior to the war in the Gulf. Syria has sinister goals in the region. They've shown their propensity to terrorize their neighbors. They've shown a propensity to hurt the Americans and kill American servicemen in Iraq, kill Lebanese and kill Jews through their sponsorship of Hezbollah and Hamas, two terrorist organizations. And I think it's time that this administration realizes that the goals of Syria are beyond regaining the Golan Heights, are beyond just entering into Lebanon. They are on track with Iran to look into the region as the ultimate goal, control of the oil, control of the countries in the region. In fact, if we remember, and I'm not an Iranian expert, but if you remember, Iran itself said most of the Gulf people are of Iranian origins. They said this about a year ago, less than a year ago. So there are the goals of Iran and the goals of Syria mostly are very sinister in the region, and we have to come to realize that.